Hello everyone, this is Casino making a video today on how to make macros. Gonna go over the basic steps on how to create a macro. I'm not gonna go over how to make modifiers in the macros since I myself don't use them, and then I will go over a few priest macros that I've specifically made for both my shadow and discipline priest for some of my viewers that have asked me about that in the past. So to begin, you're gonna hit enter and /macro, enter again. It'll bring up your create macros screen. You'll have two options for this screen. You can go into your general macros where you can make a macro that will be accessible on every character that you have, and then you can go into your character specific macros that will be specific to that character. And the reason they do this is they don't want to clutter up your macros to make it hard to find your different macros on your different characters. So to begin with, it doesn't matter which one you start on, but I'll just start on my toon specific macro, and you go to new. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and remake my DPS macro for my Shadow Priest just to give you guys an idea. It's pretty lengthy, and I think in doing so I'll be able to cover most of the basics on how to make a macro, and I'll also kill two birds with one stone. You guys can see me make my Shadow Priest macro. So to begin with, you go to new and you figure out, okay, what is this macro for? Well, I just said I'm going to make my DPS cooldown macro, so I type in DPS and I click OK. Now the next thing you do is you type # show, all one word, space. And then you can go into your spellbooks and ability, or you can go into your backpack if you want to show an on-use item, such as, let's say I wanted to show my Drums of Fury. I could do that. I hit enter, and if I save, it'll come up immediately as the Drums of Fury or whatever. Okay, so I go down to my next line, and I can /cast, or actually if it's an item you want to /use, and then you can shift left click. That's how I'm copying my items into my macros. You do the same thing with skills. Shift left click, and there it is, Drums of Fury. Then you hit enter to go down to the next line. Also, I'm going to want to use my intellect potions, my other on-use items, so /use intellect potion. Now this macro would be for, let's say, a regular battleground where you can use on-use items. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to use this in arena or in rated battlegrounds, in which case you would just make something like this where, has your badge of dominance, you use a badge of dominance, intellect potion, power infusion, battle standard, which they will allow you to use in rated battlegrounds, but I don't think arena. I could check on that. Vampiric Embrace and Shadow Fiend. As you can see, I burn a lot of my instant cooldowns in one macro. This really is effective for multiple reasons. First of all, if you use all your consumables and your cooldowns together, it's exponential. I mean, you're going to do a ton of damage in that period of time. The downside to this is if you get CC'd or whatever during this duration, you've pretty much wasted all your damage, your major damage, for the next few minutes until your cooldowns and your trinket and your intellect potion and yada 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 is available again. So, but yeah. So after you make a macro, let me go back and make the rest of this macro. /cast. Go to my spellbook and go to power infusion, shift left click it, puts it right in there. Now let's say I'm done. You guys get the idea how to make the macro at this point. Let's say I'm finished with the macro. Then you just hit save, and you can drag the macro to any of your hotkeys that you want to drag it to. And if I want to, let's say I want to get rid of the macro, I can obviously just go down here to delete, click it, it'll verify, and click yes. So I'm going to show you, for Shadow Priest I usually only use one macro, and that's my DPS macro. You can't really macro your abilities together anymore like you could back in the day, where you could just use instant abilities one after another, and you can use like a one button macro to use all your abilities. They've taken that out of the game. Um, I think it's a good thing that they have, because it makes people have to play their character. They have to know what skills to use in what succession, and they have to use those skills, and they can't just rely on like a macro to do everything for them. But at the same time, they've kept macros in the game because it is a huge part of the game. You do want to be able to use macros. It'll help you out a ton in PvP as well as PvE. Alright, well, I'm going to change my specialization right now to show you my discipline priest macros that I use. I have a couple of them. The main ones that I use for discipline is I use a DPS, or quote unquote a DPS or healing macro, where I burn my cooldowns, my trinkets the same way I would as if I was Shadow, and I have increased healing at that point. But as far as other helpful macros that you can have as discipline, I have, as you can see, Archangel individually macroed in with each one of my heals. So when I go from doing damage to healing somebody in a battleground or even in PvE, I mean, it would work in either scenario, it automatically uses my Archangel, so I don't have to have that skill hotkeyed somewhere and have to remember to use it. It's a pretty much, you know, macro and forget it type of deal. And it'll keep your discipline priest at the optimal level, where when you go from spamming smite, penance, and holy fire on somebody to gain stacks of evangelism, and then you get 5 stacks of evangelism, use Archangel, and then your healing's increased by 25%. So that's a really big deal. There's other classes, I'm sure, that you can find ways to macro your skills together in a way that is really beneficial to you. Cooldowns being one of the biggest ones. I can't think of a single DPS or healing class that I wouldn't try to macro all my instant cooldowns together and get the most out of them that I could. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope this was at least a little bit informative. Maybe later on I'll go into some advanced macros. I myself don't use them, but I think it's good that people in certain situations need to know how to make macros, and it'll benefit you in the long run. Alright, well, thank you for watching. Have a great day.